We are following breaking news today in Ottawa. The federal government is planning $37 billion in tariffs on targeted imports from the United States. Now, that is according to our colleagues at Radio Canada. It's in response to, of course, Donald Trump's threat to slap 25% tariffs on Canadian goods once he becomes U.S. president. And that, of course, is on Monday. Earlier, we got some insight and analysis into Canada's strategy from CBC News chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton.
I mean, this is something that Ottawa's been working on for some time now, right? Trying to draw up a list of places where they could put a counter-tariff, areas where it would either be symbolic, like Florida orange juice, or places where it could really be damaging for the Americans. Think steel and aluminum, which is a place where they came after us previously. So now we have an amount of what that first round could look like, as you said, $37 billion. And that is something that, as of Monday, as soon as we see, if we see on Monday, where this is headed, the government would get a series of public consultations underway that they are required to do, and the counter-tariffs could be in place within a matter of weeks. What they are also trying to think about here too, Arthi, though, is to try and make sure that this doesn't cause pain to Canadians. So this first round is trying to do that. The second round, if there's another round needed, and there may well be, if they escalate it up a little bit, will likely hurt Canadians in a more substantive way because it will include more goods. And they suspect that that will get up to $110 billion. So would it be a good idea to stock up on Florida orange juice before Monday? It might be, but they are trying to do this in a way that makes sense and doesn't hurt the Canadian economy right from the get-go.
You know, we're also watching closely as Canadian politicians are heading over to the United States, having those discussions. I'm sure you were listening in closely to what the Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly was saying. And we know Jonathan Wilkinson was also south of the border as well. How effective are those conversations? And what really struck me, and I'm not sure if it struck you too, was the fact that Melanie Joly said that it appeared a lot of the Republican lawmakers she was discussing this with really didn't have a sense of how this would impact Americans.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been the main strategy for the government, to remind Americans, whether it be business owners or business leaders or politicians, that when you put a tariff on Canadian goods coming into the United States, that cost is going to be passed down to the consumer or the business owner. That has been kind of their central argument, and as they try to prevent this from happening. I would say that they are no longer of the view that they are going to prevent it, right? What they're waiting to see now is how broad this will be, whether it will hit that 25% tariff, whether certain sectors will be exempt, for instance. It is not surprising to me that some Americans and even some elected officials don't understand how this would unfold. But I think there's a difference between them not understanding and being willing to say to Donald Trump, please don't do this. I don't think that politically would be very helpful for many Republicans. So I'm not sure whether they're making any really serious inroads, in spite of the fact that Melanie Joly, François-Philippe Champagne and others are getting some really important meetings and talking to the right kind of people.
And let's talk for a moment about Alberta and the Danielle Smith factor when it comes to the optics of a united front. How damaging might that be, not only in optics, but actually in negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concern here that when Danielle Smith did not sign on with the First Ministers earlier this week, she is concerned that there would be an export tax slapped onto Canadian oil and gas. She obviously has met with the president at Mar-a-Lago. She would like to see oil and gas be carved out if there is a tariff put on Canadian imports. She didn't seem to think that she got that kind of commitment from the president after talking with him. So to have one premier who represents a really important province in terms of generating wealth for this country not be willing to be on side with everybody else is, I think, damaging in terms of the negotiating position that Canada wants to have, which is to have your sort of biggest card in your back pocket if you need it. However, I think the Prime Minister himself said yesterday that he understands why Danielle Smith is standing up for her industry. And I think a lot of people in Alberta would understand that too, whose livelihoods depend on the oil and gas sector. The problem is that could then create some national unity problems inside our own country. So I think that's really an important piece for Canadians to watch in the coming days.
And very finally, quickly, before I have to let you go, I wanted to ask, of course, about the Liberal leadership race. We've learned news about Chrystia Freeland, also about Jonathan Wilkinson, that he's not going to be running. So wondering, what is the sort of idea here and who can take on Trump best?
Yeah, I mean, that does appear to be the way Mark Carney and certainly Chrystia Freeland in an op-ed in the Toronto Star this morning are framing the race. Not only who can take on Donald Trump best, but who is best suited to try and build up and solidify the Canadian economy in the face of these tariffs. That is, yes, an important issue and likely to be central to the next election. But there are other things that have to be addressed too, in terms of how do you make the Liberal Party different from what it was under Justin Trudeau? How do you tackle climate change if you're not going ahead with a carbon tax, as it appears to be the case for both Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney? So there's lots of issues at play still, but their positioning certainly has been that. We are also expecting Karina Gould to enter the race on Saturday and then with an in-person launch on Sunday. I think you'll hear different things from Karina Gould given her past experience. And so that means we'll have one cabinet minister from Trudeau's government in the race, and then two people who are trying to distance themselves from Justin Trudeau and really present a viable alternative to Pierre Poilievre and a real opponent to Donald Trump. It's fascinating the way all of this is sort of lining up, and it is all connected to tell a really important political story for this country right now.
That is CBC News Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton in Ottawa.